The rain poured mercilessly over the small, broken cottage as Alara stood at the doorway, her trembling hands clutching a faded eviction notice. The paper was already soaked through, but she could still read the cruel words that sealed her fate. Her father's debts had caught up to her after his death, and the land she had called home since childhood now belonged to the wealthiest man in the region, Damon Hale, the cold and calculating rancher whose empire stretched beyond the horizon. With tears blending into the rain, she whispered into the night, "Please, don't take my home," not realizing that fate had already begun to weave a story that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, Alara gathered the courage to walk to Hale Ranch, her boots sinking into the mud as the wind whipped her hair across her pale face. The ranch was enormous, guarded by tall gates and lined with purebred horses grazing in the mist. Her heart pounded as she approached the grand house, where workers whispered about the man who built an empire with his bare hands but had a heart as cold as winter steel. She was led to his study, a room filled with dark wood, leather, and the faint scent of whiskey. Damon Hale looked up from his desk, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers, curiosity flickering behind his usual indifference. "You must be the girl from the cottage," he said flatly. Alara nodded, clutching the edge of her threadbare shawl. "Please, Mr. Hale," she began, her voice cracking like the fire in the hearth, "this house, it's all I have left. My father built it, and I've nowhere else to go. I'll do anything to keep it." For a moment, silence filled the room. Damon leaned back in his chair, studying her, this fragile, desperate girl who dared to face him. "Anything," he repeated slowly, his tone unreadable. She swallowed hard, feeling her dignity teeter on the edge of despair. "Yes," she whispered, the word heavy with helplessness. Then came the words that would bind them both to a destiny neither could foresee, "Then you must be my wife." Shock rippled through Alara's body as his words sank in. "Your wife," she stammered, eyes wide with disbelief. Damon's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something vulnerable in his gaze before it vanished. "I need a wife for reasons that don't concern you," he said curtly. "You need a home. This arrangement would solve both our problems." It was madness, and yet, as the storm howled outside, Alara realized she had no other choice. With trembling lips, she agreed, feeling as though she were signing away not just her home, but her very soul. "Fine," she whispered. "I'll marry you." The wedding was quiet, held in the small chapel at the edge of town. No guests, no music, only the echo of their vows and the priest's weary voice. Damon stood stiffly beside her, his hand warm but distant when he slipped the ring onto her finger. Alara's heart ached, not because she was marrying a man she barely knew, but because it felt like her father's memory was watching, silently judging. As they left the chapel, the townspeople whispered behind them, spinning stories of a rich man's cruelty and a poor girl's desperation. But Damon ignored them all, guiding her into the waiting carriage with a simple, "You're safe now." Life at Hale Ranch was a world Alara had never known, marble floors, chandeliers, endless fields stretching to the horizon. Yet beneath the beauty was a loneliness that mirrored her own. Damon rarely spoke beyond the practical, spending long hours managing his business or riding across the ranch. The staff treated her with polite distance, unsure what to make of their new mistress. At night, Alara would sit by the window in her grand room, staring out at the stars, wondering what it meant to be both a wife and a stranger in the same breath. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, fragments of Damon's past began to surface. Alara overheard whispers of betrayal, of a fiancé who had left him for his wealthiest rival, leaving his heart sealed behind walls of pride. It was then she began to understand the coldness in his eyes, the careful distance he maintained. Yet, when he thought no one was watching, she saw kindness in the smallest gestures, the way he gentled a frightened horse, or how he quietly ensured the old ranch workers were cared for. These glimpses of warmth stirred something in her, something she dared not name. One evening, Alara found Damon in the stables, nursing an injured horse. "You care for them," she said softly, approaching him. He didn't look up, his voice rough. "Animals don't lie. They don't pretend." She knelt beside him, handing him the bandage he needed. "Not everyone does," she murmured. For the first time, his eyes met hers, and in that quiet moment, something shifted, an unspoken understanding forming between two wounded souls. That night, when he thanked her, it wasn't out of courtesy, but genuine gratitude. As the days grew warmer, so did their silent companionship. Damon began inviting her on his morning rides, showing her the hidden corners of the land he'd built from nothing. Alara found joy in the open fields, the laughter that escaped her surprising even herself. Damon would watch her from a distance, unable to explain the way her smile softened the edges of his heart. Slowly, their marriage of convenience began to feel less like a bargain and more like something real, something fragile but growing. Yet, happiness has a way of drawing storms. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the bank, proof that Alara's father's debts were not entirely settled. A rival rancher, Victor Langdon, sought to use the debt to claim part of Damon's land, threatening everything Damon had worked for. Langdon taunted Damon, sneering that he had married a beggar who would cost him everything. Damon's temper flared, and in anger, he lashed out, not at Langdon, but at Alara. "This is what I get for pitying you," he shouted. The words cut deeper than any blade. Alara fled to her old cottage, now crumbling and abandoned. She wept for hours, the weight of humiliation crushing her. She had begun to love him, truly love him, and now that love had turned to pain. Yet, as dawn broke, she realized she couldn't let the man who had once saved her lose everything because of her past. She returned to town, determined to face Langdon herself, her heart filled with both fear and resolve. When Alara confronted Langdon, she offered him something unexpected, her late father's hidden land deeds, the only thing she had left of value. Langdon sneered but accepted, unaware that those deeds held little real worth. Damon arrived just as the transaction ended, his heart pounding with both fury and regret. Seeing Alara's bravery broke something in him. He realized how blind his anger had made him, how much she had come to mean to him. He pulled her into his arms, his voice rough and trembling. "I was a fool," he whispered. "You were never my burden, you were my salvation." Alara looked up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Then let's save each other," she said softly. And for the first time, Damon kissed her, not out of obligation, but out of love. The world seemed to still in that moment, two broken hearts mending in the warmth of forgiveness. The months that followed were a season of healing. Together, they rebuilt not just the cottage, but their bond. Alara found her place in the ranch, managing the workers and tending to the horses, earning their respect. Damon learned to let go of his pride, to laugh again, to trust. They faced each day as partners, equals in love and in life. The walls around Damon's heart crumbled, replaced by the gentle certainty that love, real love, was worth every risk. Years later, as the ranch flourished and their family grew, Damon would often find Alara sitting on the porch of the restored cottage. "You still love this place," he'd tease, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. She'd smile and nod. "Because this is where everything began," she'd say. "Where I lost everything, and found something greater." He would kiss her forehead, grateful for the day she had walked into his life, soaked and trembling, yet unbreakable. In time, their story became legend in the valley, a tale of a rich man who found his heart in the poorest of girls, and a woman who taught him that love was not a transaction, but a gift freely given. Travelers who passed through the ranch often remarked on the warmth that seemed to linger there, as if the land itself had learned to love again. When the seasons turned and years melted into memory, Alara would often tell her children, "Never let pride build walls where love can build bridges." And they would listen, eyes wide, unaware that those words had once saved two lost souls. The cottage, now surrounded by wildflowers, stood as a symbol of endurance, a reminder that even the hardest hearts can be softened by kindness, and that sometimes, the greatest wealth lies not in what we own, but in who we choose to love. And so, the story of the poor girl and the rich rancher lived on, not as a tale of pity or power, but of redemption. It was a reminder that love does not ask for riches or promises, it asks for courage. For in a world where hearts are easily broken and pride easily built, the bravest thing one can ever say is not, "I'm yours," but, "Let's begin again." In the end, Alara and Damon's love became the heartbeat of the land itself, steady, enduring, and true. The wind that once howled with despair now carried laughter through the fields, and every corner of Hale Ranch whispered the same, timeless promise, that love, when fought for, can turn even the coldest house into a home.